Boom, boom, boom. What's going on, everybody? How we doing today?
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, so today we got Mr. Houssam from the Knob-Tail. Kind of before we get into that, I know I was at the Gecko Symposium that you did the this little speech on those Taylorize. How are those doing? Do you have any updates on those?
So at the symposium, I kind of told everybody not to get them ever because they're
Yeah.
really difficult as animals. But I still have a pair of them. I didn't breed them last year just because there's so much work and take a lot of patience. But this year I did pair up the pair, and the female might be gravid. I only did it because one of my buddies wants to try them, so I'm basically breeding them for him as a
Yeah.
favor, just so he can try them at some point.
Okay.
But but I'm not sure if uh, they're so difficult as babies. So even if I get eggs and they hatch, then I still have to deal with the whole raising them up if they eat, if they don't eat. Um, so it's not an easy gecko. It was kind of for me to just kind of have a goal to kind of accomplish or a challenge to accomplish. Everybody told me they were difficult, and I don't know if you guys are like me, but I don't listen to anybody. I kind of have to try it for myself.
Oh yeah.
Facts.
I'm
And,
definitely.
and everybody was right, uh, but I did find out for myself too. So
Yeah. All right, dude. Yeah, just wanted to hear any
Mhm.
updates on that. Because I know, like you said, you said it was a really difficult, especially as babies. So I was wondering if you had any uh updates on them figuring things out to get them to much more acclimated and much more easier to care for the young.
when you have them established, they're pretty easy. It's just getting them to establish. And if it was the only gecko I kept and it was a project that was like focused on and I had nothing else, I'd probably try to establish them more in the hobby. But it's kind of not very fun doing one thing and focusing all the effort. Well, for me, not everybody has a different preference, but for me, I don't really thrive in the hobby for my self accomplishment goals if I'm focusing on just one type of animal that and just pouring all everything into it. It's kind of fun to have multiple things going on, just so it's kind of a distraction from a failure or a success that you get to work on other things too and not just be so focused on one thing, which I kind of was in the beginning with Knob-Tail geckos, but as I kind of grew in the hobby, variety is nice, but too much variety can be just as much of a curse as not enough. So
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel that one right there. No, I before I kind of I had those aspirations. I wanted to be like kind of like Joe Hup. Just have
yeah,
all these. Man, that is just that's it takes a lot of like a good work ethic and a lot of determination to work with so many different species at one time. Like you gotta have everything dialed in, and if you're not consistently paying attention to each one of those, something's gonna go wrong. So
definitely. And keeping so many different types of species with different requirements and stuff like that. That's a challenge in itself too, because you have to have different rooms with different ambient temperatures and humidities, and yeah, he did he he had a lot on his plate and did a lot of geckos, which is awesome because he was able to do it. But I don't think I could be up for that challenge because, like I said, like too much variety for me. I've gotten to that step too where it's like you don't have enough variety, then you go to the total opposite end of the spectrum, and you're like, what am I getting myself into? This is just like way
yeah,
too
you
much.
just
I
gotta
can't
find some
focus.
balance. That's all it is. Just finding
Exactly.
your balance. Yeah.
I think everyone goes through it though. I mean, that's part of that
Oh yeah.
growing in the
Yeah.
hobby and stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. So I guess before we kind of get into talking about these knobtails, like, so
How about
what
me
was your
real
start in
quick,
the
a
hobby?
little introduction, Sam? Do you want to introduce yourself and maybe introduce your name, the name of your business, how you got into this, real quick, for people that
So
may not know, real quick?
yeah, So my name is Houssam Istanbuli. It's a tongue twister. I got into reptiles, well, breeding reptiles, probably in 2010 or 2011. But I've always loved reptiles. I've kept them in the past, and I went to one of the NARBCs when it was at the Anaheim Convention Center back then, maybe in 2007 or 2008, and I saw somebody have like Nephris on their table, and it was baby lettuce. So I just fell in love with them. I was like, I have to have this one day. But at the time, I wasn't like really financially ready for any type of. I mean, I think at the time they were still like $500 a baby, which I think they're still around the same price. But back then, that was a lot more money than I wanted to spend, you know. But I think around 2011, 2012, I had the opportunity to get some. And I actually didn't start with lettuce. I started with vertebralis, I think. I kind of got all the... Vertebralis is one of the easier ones, but I kind of went backwards in the scale of difficulty after vertebralis. I think I got stellatus after that, which are more of a touchy one. And then Delani, and kind of worked backwards until I basically had all of them in captivity at the time. But yeah, it all started going to the NARBC and seeing them there. And then I turned I had a condo at the time. I turned one of the spare bedrooms into basically the gecko room. And, I just started building up the collection and built my own incubator from like a wine fridge. And just talked to a bunch of people that, were breeding them. Obviously, I wasn't the first to breed any of the species that were in herpetoculture at the time, but made friends with a lot of people that, it was a relatively small community that bred Nephris at the
Just
time.
Just going to ask, how much have you seen the community grow? Because, I mean, even in the last few years, I've seen the Knobb-Tail Australian, species in general have just, taken off, man. I'd imagine the community has significantly grown since then.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I got into it, a lot of people were kind of phasing out of certain species, and I think that happens cyclically throughout the years. You'll see booms in certain reptiles, and then it'll kind of, everybody's breeding them, and then, the people that kind of got into it and kind of got over it, kind of got out, and the people that still liked them, kept going. But at the time, I think I bought some animals off people that were getting out, and then some off of people that have been breeding them for like 10, 15 years prior to me getting in the hobby. But at the time, I think there was only like, I don't know, I think like 10 people that I could name that were breeding them for me to be able to reach out to get some. And that kind of started like the whole, kind of Pokemon mindset, like gotta catch them all or collect them all type of deal. So once and then once all the animals were ready to breed, I had a pretty successful first year, but it was mostly just listening to all the information that the breeders were so kind to share with me. I think it was such a smaller group back then that, everybody was kind of open and trying to help each other out and stuff like that. I try to do that too when people get animals from me. But yeah, that's kind of how it started for me.
In general, you guys have a lot of responsibility, I mean, these things aren't coming back in, so it's, unfortunate, but sometimes when people lose interest in a species, the hobby loses a species. Can't get these Australian species back, it's a noble thing to do, in all honesty. It's a lot more than just collecting, you guys that are focusing on these specific, genus of animals is really doing the hobby a huge service,
Yeah, for sure. I can't really take credit for any of that since that was all done before.
You're one of them, you're holding them on. You're holding on to them, it's
yeah, definitely.
It's a huge plus.
Talking about like the booms and stuff, I think between like when I started till now, social media has had a huge growth. So I think a lot of exposure, I was still emailing people back then about, do you have this available? Do you have that available? And before my time, people were like sending letters to each other or making phone calls.
Look
Making
at
phone
the
calls. Maybe
Time
letters.
magazine.
Stretch. but but yeah, calling each other and talking about animals. Social media was I think that's what made the hobby in general grow so much in popularity. But it's also had its downside too. In the beginning, I really wanted to get to know everybody, and I like that smaller kind of community type sense. And nowadays, I'm just kind of more of a hermit, like just kind of do my own thing and talk to certain people, but I'm not like out trying to meet, more people. And it's not that I don't want to. It's just it's a lot of time, effort, and stuff like
It's
that.
a lot of energy.
So
And trust me,
yeah,
I feel you
and
on that so much. Like after a certain time, I I try not to even get on my phone and get on and talk to people because man, I'm like, look, I'm tired, I'm drained. It's hard for me to even look at my phone and really try to have a conversation with somebody after like 6 p.m. I was like, yeah,
yeah,
no, we'll reconvene this conversation tomorrow morning when my battery's recharged. So
sure.
yeah, I definitely feel that. Um, so how many species of Knob-Tails do you currently have?
So a few years ago, um, I used to do a lot of import export as well. I'd go to Ham and like do import or exports from there, come back and import stuff. And I was really into it, and it was fun, and got to meet a lot of people that I talked to overseas that were, talking to online for years. But as you guys all know, like there was a big crackdown on a lot of the Australian stuff, and so like a lot of species just got banned from getting imported and exported, and knobtails were actually one of them. I think they went CITES a few years ago. It's like the lowest appendix, though. I think they went CITES 3. I could be wrong. But before they even officially went CITES, a lot of that stuff kind of just started being rejected at the ports, or U.S. Fish and Wildlife would say, like, no, we're not accepting these. So at that point, I kind of started dwindling down the net first collection a little bit because it was just a lot harder to do bloodline trades and things like that with people overseas, and then like some customers were from overseas too. So 1 year they would take like half of the babies I produced, I'd ship them to like Japan, or I'd ship them to like Korea or Europe or wherever, and that was kind of all kind of dying out. So I didn't feel the need to produce that many, so I kind of cut down species just to the ones I really enjoyed. So currently I'm working with Vertebralis, Levis levis, Levis pilbarensis, Amier, Asper, and I think I have a pair of Levissimus. Six species?
Yeah.
But at one time I had Stellatus as well. I had Cinctus, I had Wheeleri, I had Delaney. I had basically all that were available in herpetoculture at the time. But then after breeding everything that I had, I kind of honed down to like what I could potentially see myself breeding every year and liking it. And it's also like from a business perspective, you don't want to just produce a ton of babies and just sit on them or flood the market or whatever. I mean, the small business is a small business for me. I have a day job too, so it's not like my main focus or my main income. So I don't go crazy every year breeding stuff. I actually get pretty lazy sometimes too, where I don't even pair stuff. But I kind of do it at my own pace because I can. I mean, I have a lot of I give a lot of props to the people that do it as a main source of income. That would be too stressful for me. I think that would take a little bit of the fun out of it. Just with all the things that go wrong with a bigger collection, not all your eggs hatch, and things happen, and if I'm waiting on something to hatch and something goes wrong, it's got to pay for my mortgage. I think I wouldn't enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
I don't have the courage to do that. So, but but yeah, so yeah, I think I keep 6 species, and then like I said, when I dwindled out a little bit of keeping all the nephros species or having multiple pairs, I started getting to other geckos and lizards, not necessarily from Australia, but like Tenepus from Africa, uh, some other Australian. Actually, I got into Oedira fimbria a couple of years ago, which were pretty cool. My buddy Frank actually produced some. Frank Colachico. I actually went to Australia with him and a couple of my buddy
Oh, check.
Greg.
We seen the videos. I've watched the videos plenty of times.
So
Oh man.
yeah, that trip to me and to those guys too was like a dream trip because for me, because obviously I was obsessed with Nephris and all the Australian species, and then over the years, getting a camera to take pictures of my own collection, trying to get better at photography, like was always a dream to find some of this stuff in the wild and photograph it. So that was like a dream. So we planned that trip for over a year, and then went for I think it was 12 days on the ground or something. But that was I after that trip, I was like, I don't even care about keeping reptiles. I just want to travel more and just see them in the wild.
Life changing. Yeah, we were talking to Frank. That's yeah, man, it's life changing experience. Take one thing like that to just change how you view everything. With these reptiles and life in general. To be quite frank.
Yeah, it's really cool to be, having a good year with geckos or any reptile. Sometimes you get the thought of like, okay, I can get the next thing. Like for me, that's how I built my collection. And I think that's how a lot of people build the collection. I don't think everyone has like thousands of dollars laying around and so it says, I'm going to just buy everything I ever wanted in a collection in one go, right? For me, it took years of just building it up, producing, trading, selling, buying. But at a certain point, you're like, okay, I can buy this $2,000 pair of geckos, or I can sell, a few pairs this year and take a trip, somewhere. And that one really opened up my eyes because I was like, wow, that's an experience. But having a big collection, it is difficult to travel for that long, which is kind of the reason I started, slimming down the collection a bit too, because, it was my wife is a saint, but gone for 10 days in Australia with the collection that I have, or at least it was bigger at the time, with the crickets and the feeders and stuff. Like, she knows what I keep and breed, and she appreciates it and stuff. But obviously, she's not as much into it as I am. So, getting some friends to come cover, for you, like, collect eggs, check on hatchlings. It is difficult to get away for
That's
more
like a
than a
whole
few
other
days.
full-time job.
It's a ball and chain, and
Yeah.
it's difficult. But yeah, I definitely want to keep continuing to travel and herp and check out some other places. I do want to go back to Australia again. I think we did pretty good in Western Australia. I think I'd like to go check out the East Coast for like the leaf tails, all the Saltularias, and some of the other geckos would be cool. Maybe the Central Australia for like Amia and some of the other stuff. It's such a massive country. You can't do it in one trip. Obviously, you got to take it in sections. And even a section, you can hit that section like years and years and years and not come. It's huge. People don't realize how huge Australia is.
I grew up watching Steve Irwin covering over a span of like 20 years,
Yeah.
Like watching him as a kid. It took my whole childhood to watch him seem like cover Australia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was really cool. And then when I got back home, it kind of made me appreciate what I have even more, like seeing certain species in the wild was like, it's crazy. Like road cruising Nephris, like I go to the deserts here in Southern California, like San Diego County, road cruise like Coleonyx, Variegatus and stuff like that. And then when you're out in Australia, road cruising like Nephris, Cinctus, and it's just like, I can't believe I just like pulled up on that. It's a really odd feeling, but it was super cool. And we saw a lot of the targets we went to see.
Nice.
But I think that attributes to like syncing up with people that have been there, being lucky with the weather. Obviously, the weather and the moon cycle is always important, but also just doing so much research. I think that was like a year's of research, you know. And we missed a few things, but we saw a majority of what we wanted to see. So I can't complain about that trip at all.
Did you guys
Yeah,
take
So
any field guides with you or anything when you went? Did you have anything like to reference while you were out there? Or you
you
did all
know,
like pretty much all your studying before?
I no, we had. I I think each one of us had a field guide. I don't think it was necessarily like a field guide, so to speak, but more like
Like
a
a quick little reference, see if, if you
yeah,
found something you didn't know much about.
yeah, like where things are with the maps located,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
with the range and stuff like that. But nothing that was that you can read and be like, go to this location, you will
yeah,
find
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Not not as like I don't think they. I could be wrong, but I don't think they have that detailed of level of field guides in Australia. Mostly because they're so protective of their species, and so many of them are endangered. And so a lot of them are still being like described. Even discovered ones are not fully like described yet. So
Sure.
exact locations are never really given. So you kind of have to talk to people, and they'll say like around this area I found this, and but certain species are really abundant, like Shark Bay, for instance. Nephrus levis occidentalis is the Nephrus that's really common there, and that's really abundant in the region. Like I've talked to a few people where they said they literally have to swerve, to not hit any on the road. There's so
yeah.
many. When we went, yeah, when we went, we didn't see that many of them. We saw a few, but depending on like, there's some really dense populations of certain species in certain areas. One of the cool places was Payne's Find. It's like a 4-hour drive from Perth. That's where we found. We took. It was a pretty crazy trip. So we flew from LAX to Sydney. So that was like a 13-hour flight or whatever. Had like a 2-hour layover, and then it was a 5-hour flight to Perth because it's basically like flying from New York to California. And then got in a car, got the rental car, went to the store, and drove to Payne's Find, which was another 4 hours, as it was getting dark and started herping. So it was like 24 hours of traveling to start herping. But in Payne's
Mm.
Find, it was really cool. There's we saw vertebralis, Nephrus wheeleri, Diplodactylus, Polker, and a few other geckos. And that's a pretty cool area to herp because it is so densely populated with so many different species of geckos. And then like Ingernia depressa are really prevalent there, so we saw those during the daytime. So that was a good like first stop. But yeah, like some people that I know have been there and have told me like some tips and tricks on like finding certain things like Ingernia. But like the geckos and stuff, it's kind of like you either see them or you don't, right? Like there's no like tips and tricks for finding them. Like if you're in the general area and they're out, then you got to find them. If they're not out, then like we saw Stropharis elderi in Payne's Find, and there's really only one area in that whole region where you can find them because they live in spinifex, which is a terrible plant that everybody wants for their terrarium, which I would highly advise against. But it's literally a spiky this big. It's just spikes everywhere, and the Stropharis hide it. And everybody wants it for their terrarium, like they want to grow it. And it's like if you have a gecko in a terrarium that's in spinifex, you're never going to see it, and you're never going to be able to get it because it's gonna you're gonna have cuts. But yeah, we only saw one Stropharis elderi the entire trip, and it was on the first day in an area where they're not so heavily populated. So it's kind of hit or miss, right? And for such a long trip, like you want to make the best out of it, you want to see the most out of it. So yeah, some stuff we saw one of, but we saw it, and then some stuff we saw a lot of. It just depends on the conditions. But yeah, I mean, it was an awesome trip. Took a lot of photos, Frank did a lot of videos for his channel, Reptilian Diaries. He travels a lot more than I do, obviously, but it's cool that he documents it for the rest of us to be able to check it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a super fun trip. I'd recommend more people to do that, you know, especially the animals that they keep and they like. Like, it's crazy, like, that I didn't do it earlier on. Because, you know, animals and reptiles can be super expensive. Like, a pair of geckos that you could buy could be like a trip somewhere, you know?
Just gonna say, way more than a trip, a car rental, and I mean,
Yeah.
you get a 2 pairs of amii, 2 breeding pairs. You could damn near spend a month over there. Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, that definitely changed my mindset a little bit. I was like, yeah, I want to do more of that. So my collection's not as big as it used to be. I trimmed down a little bit. I'm trimming down a little bit more. I'm still keeping certain species of Nephris, but I'm definitely not breeding as much as I was. Like, I slowed down considerably over the last 3 years, I would say. Like, after COVID, I think I just started slowing down because I was like, this is a lot. And time, it's all time and space, right? Like, so the bigger your collection, the more time you're going to spend doing it. There's that balance. It's really hard for me to find a balance with certain things. Like, when I like something, I go like 100% on it, and sometimes it just like gets burnt out a little bit. Took a little bit of stuff back, concentrating a little bit on some lizards and stuff, like some Uromastyx, Egernia, and some other stuff too. Just there's some projects that I'll get just because it's interesting, and then once I've kind of bred it a couple of seasons, I'll kind of look for something else and try my hand at it. Like, I did that with some of the rare Timon species like Kurdistanicus and Princeps, and they're super cool, but I only have so much space, right? And it's always fun to like breed something enough to get it into, enough people's hands, and then be like, okay, cool, I can use that case for something else and try something else to kind of keep the hobby interesting too,
Oh, yeah,
so I think it's, but I'm definitely not as pumped as I used to be as far as getting new animals, like getting something new to breed. Because I had a lot of goals for myself, earlier on to be able to get some of the Egernia, so the Uromastyx and stuff like that. And after kind of getting them, like, there's not that much, more that I would want to try. There are some species, like, I haven't bred everything I have, so there's like the continuous challenges with some stuff, which always makes it fun but frustrating at times. But yeah, I don't go to shows as often anymore. I can't even remember the last time I went to shows. And when I do, I'm not getting anything. Like, maybe some UV bulbs or something, something not alive.
Try to grab that deal, right?
Yeah. Yes, that upkeep stuff gets expensive too, You don't realize how much, like, you spend on. I didn't realize how much I spent on crickets alone until like the end of the year when I'm doing taxes and stuff, Just like, I spent $4,000 on crickets last year, like, and it's not a cheap hobby, but I'm also not doing it the smartest way. Like, people breed their own, feeders like dubia and stuff, and I'm just like stuck in my ways. Like, I don't like feeding dubia because they burrow in like my tubs. So it'd be amazing if they didn't, because it would be such a great feeder and it'd be like free feeders for life. But I just don't have time to sit there and watch each individual animal eat. So yeah, feeders and I don't like banded crickets, which are cheaper and more readily available. I use the domestic crickets.
I just switched back to them myself. So
the banded crickets are really weird with, they work for lizards pretty well, most lizards pretty well, but for geckos, for me, not that they didn't work, I think they work fine, but my preference with the domestic crickets is they're a bit slower. They're not as jumpy,
Not as agile, and they get twice as big, man. They're just
and they get
they're
bigger. Yeah, like
yeah,
a
I love
large
them, man.
banded versus a large domestic. And then the thing I noticed a lot when I tried banded a few times too is their antennae are so long that when they're running around, that will hit the gecko first, and the geckos will kind of freak out, because it's like something touching them that's like an inch long or 2 inches long, and yeah, it kind of stressed the animals out.
It's
and
funny you noticed that. I noticed it too and wondered if anybody else ever did. And it does, because I feel like their eyes are good to a degree, but they're like anything else. If they get touched on their tail before they can say feel the vibration of the bug, it spooks them. When the animal's closer, there's more senses involved, and they're not as spooked. They know it's food. For all they know, they'll getting touched from 2 inches away, it's a predator. It's funny you say that, because I notice it a lot with a lot of my smaller animals.
Yeah, especially babies and stuff. That's what I noticed. And it sucks because bandits live for so long, and they're really great feeders if they work for you. Because the domestic crickets. I know before I started, there was like the virus breakout of the cricket virus, and that was basically the downfall of the domestic cricket. And some major brands still do them, and claim that they're virus free, and I'm sure it is, but they just don't last as long as a banded cricket or any other type of cricket. So except actually in California here we get black crickets from rainbow mealworms, but they can only send them to California. I think it's like a USDA thing. They can't cross state lines with them. So you can either pick them up or get them shipped to you if you live in California.
Crazy, because I can find them outside of my house. That's all I find are the black.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure you get, but those are the best gut load crickets I've ever seen.
I tried to get them. I couldn't get them either out here. I tried. There was one time, and I thought I had them, and I wound up getting refunded the money. My order went through. I'm like, hey, I'm telling everybody, I got them. I ordered them. Never got them.
Yeah, so I get those occasionally, but they do get pretty large, and they don't die either, like very easily. I think the domestic cricket's downfall, like if it's too hot in the room you're keeping them, like you'll have a massive die-off and like all of them are dead the next day. I didn't keep them at 78 degrees, like I went to 85 and half of them are dead. But yeah, the black crickets are pretty good, but they are like, I can pick up an adult black cricket and it'll bite me and I can feel it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you gotta be, you gotta be a bit careful with some of that stuff. Like not to throw too many into like a gecko's enclosure and have them come out at night and bite your geckos and stuff. Cause they will like, do some damage. So I don't get them that often. When I do, I get the smaller sizes. But they do grow, like, I will put food in there because I feed my crickets, I clean and feed them, the day before I'm feeding everything. And the banded crickets, or not the banded, I'm sorry, the black crickets, like, that food will be gone in like 2 hours. And I'll just put so much stuff in there. And they're just like, when the geckos eat them, they're just exploding. Like, they're just so gut-loaded. So I really like that. The domestic crickets, I feel, are like not that good at, not as good, But I've tried different feeders. I've tried, I think, red runners, but red runners, the problem with them is if they get out,
never tried them myself.
You have a population in your house.
Yeah, you might as well burn the house down.
So when I lived in the condo, I had some red runners, but when we moved to our house, I was like, okay, I'm not getting this. I remember when I'm moving from my condo to my house, I had like an empty cage that wasn't used for like 2 years that I was moving and cleaning out. And I found like live red runners in there. I didn't even know what they were surviving. So I was like,
that's about it.
Yeah. So yeah, speeders is definitely.
You try any worms? Any types of worms, meals, or?
So I do occasionally get wax worms. mealworms and superworms. Superworms probably more than anything else as far as worms. But a lot of that stuff has a tough exoskeleton. For a lot of the geckos, it's a bit hard to digest. So I try to feed like freshly molted superworms when they're all soft and stuff. The lizards, a lot of the lizards will eat the superworms. But yeah, a lot of that stuff, like the harder exoskeleton stuff, I noticed like if you feed too much of it, animals can regurgitate. If or when they defecate, you'll see a lot of the like undigested exoskeleton in there. So I don't feed worms that often. And then certain worms, if you feed too much of them, it's just not good. Like wax worms, it's just get your animals fat. They're good if you're trying to put weight on a certain animal, if it just laid or something. But yeah, I mostly stick to crickets just because it's easier for me to keep. But I do get waxworms, some mealworms, and a lot of superworms. Not a lot, but I'll get superworms like once a month or something.
I got a quick question, kind of a selfish personal question, but when you were in Australia, did you guys take notice? I don't even think I asked Frank this. Did you take notice of any type of bug that they may have been feeding on more? Like, did you flip any stone and notice like something stand out more than anything else bug wise that they were probably doing?
So we didn't have to flip anything to see bugs. Those things were just attacking our faces nonstop, especially at night with their headlamp on. Like Frank and my buddy Greg, the flies were hitting us like no other during the day. It was insane. Like I did bring like a fly mask, just like nets that go around your head because I must have swallowed like 1,000 flies when I was in Western Australia. But I was so excited to be there, they didn't really bother me as much as the other guys. But at nighttime, there was a lot of bugs, and saw a lot of grasshoppers. I'm sure the animals.
That's what I was figuring, grasshoppers or something.
Grasshoppers and locusts and stuff, and those are the ones that stick out the most to me because I think I saw those in abundance. I think we might have seen a walking stick or two, like the larger ones. But yeah, grasshoppers.
You ever tried using those as feeders? You ever tried grasshoppers?
Like we can't. I don't think in California we can get feeder grasshoppers. I think it's like an invasive species type of deal.
Oh, you got what's called out there? Dean. He the Feed My Chameleon guy. He breeds grasshoppers out of Cali. Yeah, so I would maybe talk to him. Yeah, he's in Cali.
I thought, why don't I fuck? I think he was in Arizona.
Yeah, so I would definitely. I haven't tried, but that would be a good one. I see some people in Europe actually feed grasshoppers to certain things.
So Knobb-Tails?
I don't know if I've seen it for Knobb-Tails, but I know I've seen it for lizards. Like some tree monitor guys will feed grasshoppers and stuff. But they have them in like big totes like we do our crickets, just filled with grasshoppers. But yeah, I'm sure they would enjoy.
Yeah, I'm curious about the Knobb-Tails. It's like I would imagine not every species is big enough to eat a full-blown grasshopper.
Well, it depends on the size too, what stage in the life cycle the grasshopper is. If it's a small one, I'm sure they'll eat it. But yeah, I saw a lot of grasshoppers. Blanking on the bugs just because I wasn't really paying that much attention to them, but definitely saw those, and I'm sure that. And saw some beetles too, some random beetles, and some roaches too. But I couldn't tell you what kind of roaches they were.
Yeah, I didn't even know Australia had roaches. I guess why wouldn't they? Huh? Never thought of that.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. So
interesting.
But yeah,
that's cool. Cool observations. It's like it's forever.
Yeah. So no, since you had those opportunities to go over to Australia, right? Now, how has that changed your captive husbandry practices with your collection?
Question.
Yeah, one thing I did notice, and I think I always make this mistake, was the animals out in the wild aren't necessarily all plump and fat like we have them in captivity, or I have them in captivity. I was pretty religious about feeding my collection like at least 3 times a week, every other day type of deal. And I kind of over the last few years, I kind of switched it more to like a lean and mean type of method. Always hungry, not always like starving hungry, but like when you put food,
It's
like
more natural. Famine is much more natural than feast. It's
yeah.
if your animals are
So,
hungry all the time, I feel like that's it's not cruel. It's a good thing. Like in the wild, they're not gonna pass up a meal ever because they're missing them all the time. They don't. It's
so yeah, I definitely cut down on the feeding, especially with the lizards, because I was feeding the lizards just as much as I was feeding the geckos. Basically, with certain geckos, certain metabolisms and stuff. Some of them have faster metabolisms. It depends on the ambient temperature in the room too. I did this before going to Australia, but I used to have a hide on both sides of my, tubs for geckos. One on the warm, one on the cool. But I always noticed that most of the animals, anytime I opened up the tub, were always on the hot side. And it seemed like that would always speed up their metabolism. Like they wouldn't gain that much weight, even though I was feeding them 3 times a week or 4 times a week. So I think it was like 7, 8 years ago. I took out the hot side hide and just had a cool, moist hide. Now they just go to the hot side to thermoregulate, but they're not necessarily always stuck there in that heat, burning calories and speeding up the metabolism. And that actually fattened up my animals by itself without me feeding them additional, like increasing feeding. So that was something that I learned just by keeping them. And mostly just not feeding them as much. Like it's always nice to see your animals feed. Like that's when you know they're healthy if they have that appetite and feeding and stuff. But honestly, like I've got some of my geckos and animals. Australia and saw them wow, how smaller they were, how leaner they were. They were healthy. They weren't like obviously there's some outliers if it's an older you see in the wild doing well, but the majority kind of look nice, healthy, but they're more on the leaner side. And so I kind of took that back and was like, I don't think I need to be feeding 3 or 4 times a week, or not as much, right? If I do feed that many times a week, I don't give them as much prey items, unless it's obviously like a gravid female or something. I want to pump as much nutrients as possible for her, because she's developing eggs and stuff, and that takes resources. Yeah, I don't feed as often. I don't grow, and I used to grow animals up, especially earlier on when I first started. Like a gecko would hatch, and then a year later it'd be breeder size, and ready. Like some of them would produce eggs, like infertile eggs, because they got from baby to adult size in like 10 months because I would feed them so much. And I kind of slowed that down to make them like 2 years instead of 1 year, and just taking the time to grow. And they just seem a lot healthier that way. And I don't see as much problems as I would from like feeding them so much. I can't, cut down on the feeding. Didn't really change up, enclosure wise or anything on most of the stuff, because I kind of already knew what was working for the geckos was working for the geckos. I didn't see like a need to change anything up. And then, for the Egernia and stuff that I saw in the wild, it's really hard to replicate the wild, Like, you can do your best with like rocks and plants and stuff like that, but nothing beats like natural sunlight and weather changes and stuff like that. But when you see what kind of substrate and what kind of like rock things are living on, like try to switch some of the cages to more of that. But yeah, I mean, from all the pictures and talking to people and stuff, like a lot of the keeping was basically nailed down. I think it'd probably be a better learning lesson to be there for an extended period of time and see when the animals are active, like, and write down like the temperature and the humidity, and kind of for that prolonged period of time, kind of monitor activity and kind of see when things are out, or when you start seeing babies and stuff like that. So I think that would be cool if I got a chance to like live in Australia for a few months and observe that. But on a trip, it's like a perp trip. It's kind of hard to take them and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, seeing the habitat's really cool. You know, like a lot of the geckos do live on sand, but a lot of them you kind of see what kind of sand they're living on and burrowing in, and then some of them are more like a rocky, gravelly area, like the Cinctus and but like Pilbarensis and Vertebralis were like literally on sand, which was cool to see. So
Was it like real soft sand or was it kind of
yeah,
compact
very
sand?
fun. It was pretty fine, like red sand. It was super cool.
Okay.
Um,
Nice.
yeah, it was pretty fun. At least where we saw the Pilbarensis. The Payne's Find kind of has a lot of different types of substrate on the ground, but yeah, it was pretty soft sand. I mean, there was holes in the ground, so and I actually saw like a Diplodactylus, I think it was Pulcher, peeping its head out like of one of the burrows, like coming out for the night. So it's cool to see that these things actually are coming out of like little burrows that they made.
Yeah.
Getting out of that midday heat, it's probably quite a few degrees cooler underground.
It can get so hot. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. They're escaping the heat. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So if they're hiding underground all day, these guys are probably really not in UVB at all, huh? Like they're not in the sunlight, so you it wouldn't make sense to offer UVB much, would it?
No. Or any light, actually.
That's what I'm saying. Any light in general. I don't on mine. I have one Knobb-Tail, and I put a heat pad on the back, just to try to warm one side of the tank or whatnot for, the stone. I keep my stone, but I have zero light on her whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a battle people will fight like forever if all animals need UVB and
When you
whatnot.
hear the facts, like from someone like you that's been there and listened to their cycles, I mean, it's like it's clear as day. Like what purpose is light doing? And I mean, nothing. The sun, sure, is heating up the environment, but the wavelengths, the UV rays are doing nothing for the animal itself.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I'm not an expert from going there once on herping, but from the animals I did see and what time of day they were out, from all the literature I've read, from all the pictures I've seen, there seem to be strictly nocturnal animals, not like crepuscular or diurnal or anything like that. So I don't think UV would hurt if you had like one in a display cage or display enclosure, and that's what you can keep these things in multiple ways, right? There's not one way to keep, but if they're only coming out at night, you're basically just have a lit enclosure that you might as well just put an LED in there for
lighting up stone
for the day to simulate the night. I'm sure simulating, day and night is important because they, and in my room there is a window, so they do get that like light cycle, and I think that's more important than obviously like a UV for a nocturnal animal, so to speak. But I think a day and night cycle is definitely, kind of gives the animals like a concept of time, and when I open an enclosure of a nocturnal animal during the day, and there's light in the room, 99% of the time is under the hide. And then when I go in there at night, when it's pitch black, they're out, thermoregulating and stuff like that. So
if they didn't have light in general, ambient light, they couldn't be nocturnal, period. I mean, it couldn't be crepuscular or nocturnal if there wasn't a light cycle. I mean, there's got to be some type of ambient light to trigger that, or
for sure. But I mean, some people enjoy keeping a naturalistic setup, which is totally fine. But as far as like a benefit, I don't believe there's a benefit. You're not doing the animal any harm by not providing UV. And I like to keep I keep them in racks, in a rack system, pretty minimalist actually, because earlier on, like I said, I had 2 hives and maybe like a decoration or something, but I found it the simpler the better. It's easier for them to find food. Crickets aren't hiding anywhere. As long as I'm not putting too much, they can. As long as you have a proper temperature gradient that they can escape the heat or escape the cold. I think that's more important than trying to provide like UV. They're pretty shy animals, and most nocturnal animals are shy animals. And that's why, like, when you go herping a lot of times and it's a full moon, like, sometimes you won't find anything because it's too bright for them. Yeah. They feel exposed, from predators.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I don't get in arguments over the UV thing. I don't keep my animals on UV. They've been breeding and eating, and it seems to work, so I'm not going to add UV. For Netflix.
Yeah. Okay.
What are you doing with hydration, moisture? You using water bowls? Are you misting?
I haven't used the water bowl in any Netflix enclosure. So like I mentioned, I keep a moist hide on the cool side. So basically have just sand that's not like wet, but it's moist. And, I take every feeding, I'll spray and I'll re-moisten the hide. And that hide is usually where they'll lay their eggs too when they're growing. But I do it for males and females. And basically, kind of have the sand come up in like a gradient, so the hot side is kind of flat, and the cage or the enclosure is pretty flat. And then once it gets to the cool side, it kind of moves up, and that's where I can press the hide in after I've kind of fluffed it up and made it moist, and then kind of dig the hide in there. Obviously, not when the gecko is in there. And that traps the moisture until, the next feeding. But what I do is I'll spray the walls of the tub every time too, and the geckos will lick off of that. I don't drench it, but I spray it pretty well. And usually the next day, everything is dry except for what's underneath the hive. And it's important to provide that proper ventilation to do so. The racks I use have pretty good ventilation, so you're not getting like drops of moisture. When you use certain racks, you have to put holes on the side of your tubs, or you get that moisture buildup. So that kind of can cause problems with bacteria and too much humidity. But it seems, I think when I got my first Netflix, I had like a little water bowl in there, and then the next day I went in there, it was just full of sand. So I was like, okay, that's not working very well. But yeah, I don't for any of the geckos I keep, I don't provide a water dish. The lizards are a different story, obviously. But yeah, I can't think of a single gecko I keep that. Actually, I take that back. The tailor eye, Hematoconix tailor eye. I keep a little water dish for them. I don't think I've ever seen them drink out of it, but yeah. But that's because I don't use sand in their enclosure, because I've had problems with them eating the sand. So they even have more of a bare bone setup, because I'm like, okay, you don't get to eat substrate either. So you can't kick substrate into the bowl, so I'm going to give you a water bowl.
Nice. So speaking of breeding, right? So, for all the species you keep, is it pretty much standard across for how you prepare them for like the cooling and then into the breeding?
Yeah, I don't do anything special really. Where I live in Southern California, we don't really get a winter here. Like, it's pretty sad winter.
So I'm right there with you in Arizona. Like,
this
thing is, it's warm and hot. That's it.
You guys ain't missing nothing, I promise you.
Like the first, I think, 7 years, I didn't even cool my animals at all. When it got into the cooler months, like the ambient in the room would drop a bit, so it definitely wasn't as hot. So I didn't feed the animals as often, so it was kind of like soft cooling. I still fed them, but maybe like once a week or something. A lot of them are kind of not very active all the time. As I said, the ambient in the room dropped, and they could feel that. And I kind of just, waited for it to warm up and start cranking things up again. And, that seemed to be fine. The only time I actually tried cooling was just because I wanted a break from taking care of animals. So like from November, at Thanksgiving, for 2 months, I shut them down, the entire room down, and I didn't see any different results, like with breeding or
Yeah.
anything. So I was like, okay, I can do this as a break for myself, or I can not do this and still have the same results. But yeah, I never cooled anything.
Okay.
And with most of the species I keep, it's not really necessary. I don't think I keep any geckos that require deep cooling, because most of the stuff that I keep is arid desert species. So like, obviously deserts can get cool depending on which one. Yeah, I don't. Some of the other stuff like leaf tails and stuff that I haven't tried, I'm sure benefit from the cooling process in the winter
Yeah.
temps and stuff like that. And
So
I've
I'll
always
probably
actually wanted.
in a few years
Yeah,
because I got amnicolas. So once
oh
they get up to, I'm gonna actually put them. Well, I might put them outside, like during the winter time, just to get them that
yeah,
nice, crazy cool. Because my buddies literally show me pictures of them. He'll show me the tent gun. It'll say like 42 degrees, and they're still out trying to
yeah,
hunt. So,
yeah.
like I said, I want to go ahead and test that out over here, where I know it's not going to get that crazy cold, but no, we'll see what happens with that. But that's a few years down the line.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always thought leaf tails were super cool, like the Saltuarius, the Phylurius. But the main deterrent for me from keeping them was because I think it gets a little too hot, and I just don't think they thrive. And I don't want to move. I don't want to have cages outside of and start the whole process of like, it's not here anymore. We're expanding, the different
Yeah,
areas. But yeah, like I know some people that have kept them that just have a cool room where it's like leaf tail, Australian leaf tails, Madagascan leaf tails, and more cooler temp stuff, higher humidity, cooler temps. And they keep their arid species in a different hot room, and they're doing great. But yeah, that was the main deterrent for me. Was I try to keep things that are kind of similar in care, just so I don't have to do drastic changes.
oh, that makes
But
sense. Makes it, like
yeah,
I said, makes it streamlined of keeping like you said, more species with commonalities than having, oh shit, like me over here. I got on one end I got Stropharis, and then on the other end I got Chihuahuas, Goniosaurus, Phylloris, and Europlatus on this side. So I know that. Yeah, it takes a
yeah,
lot of
it's dual. It's definitely. But yeah, for me, if I get into something, I like to get a few of it. Like if I got like a pair of leaf tails, or if I wanted the leaf tails, I'd probably get like a group of them. And
It's like
I just
Jason. You
want,
couldn't have one species; you had to have them all.
yeah.
yeah. So
It's definitely
no,
addictive.
yeah, but it's addicting, yeah, and but it's fun. It's always fun seeing something new hatch, or a
Oh
baby in
yeah.
a cage and stuff like. Keeps it interesting. It keeps it fun.
Yeah, definitely. So when you're setting up the so they breed and all that good stuff, right? So how are you setting up your eggs and incubation? Like what kind of medium do you like to use for 'em? Do you like stick it all the way in the medium, or do you let it sit over like what I'm saying, like let it kind of float up over top like a Sims method or something like that?
So I've tried. I don't say I've tried it all, but I've always used perlite. Uh, whether I'm using the suspended incubation or straight on the substrate, and it's worked really well for me from the beginning.
Okay.
So I never changed it. I did start. I did when I first started. I was pretty terrified about like getting the mix wrong of like water and the
Yeah.
ratio with water and light. I just didn't trust myself. Like I'm like, what is this 50-50 like volume or my weight? And I was like, so I did get like those gecko incubation trays in the beginning when I first started. I just did everything on those and it worked. So I kept doing it and got some bigger sim containers and kept doing it that way. But I always used perlite, but I wasn't so paranoid about having the ratio perfect of water. And, and perlite. But then certain species, like when I bred Uromastyx, I used perlite again, but I actually, made indentations in the container, put the eggs in there, and covered them a little bit. And yeah, I've mostly used perlite, with the exception of when I got into Tenepus. They're like a hard-shelled egg, which I wasn't used to because all the gecko species I kept were just a soft-shelled egg, and you don't need to really have moist substrate for them. So I would just put them in like a little bottle cap, like on sand, in a container that had like moist perlite in it, but not directly on it. So it was just on a little bottle cap with sand.
Yeah,
And
I'm doing that
that's
right
how
now.
I,
For Daclus
yeah,
and my Homophilus. I'm doing that both those or that method with those right now.
yeah,
So
that seems to work. And then this year I'm trying, even though I've had them for a couple of years, Geckoella jaipuriensis. They actually got switched to Certodactylus, reclass. Yeah, jaipuriensis. And I got some eggs from those, and I'm doing the same thing where they're just on a bottle cap, and that bottle cap is on moist perlite.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have 2 incubators, just because one I use for the Uromastyx that cook a little hotter at like 88 degrees or something, and then the gecko one I have it set to 84, but the temperature in the containers is usually around 82. I've noticed throughout the years, no matter the incubator I've used, but my experience has been obviously whatever you set it to isn't exactly what is reading inside the containers in the incubator. So I've temp gunned it a few times, and it's always, for me, in my case, it's always usually 2 degrees lower in the container than what I set my incubator. So I'll set my incubator, if I wanted it 82 in the container, I'll set it for 84. And I don't know what that is. I'm sure I can find out why, but I can't think of it right now. But yeah, I think
where that is. That's where it has to be, like where that little probe, like where it's gauging that heat from. So if not, it might not be hot all the way down to the bottom. Like for me, I have like the Exoterra Incubator Pro. It looks like a hoverbator. So and it reads that like right now it says like 83, but that probe is like in the middle, but it's hanging in the air. So I don't know if the bottom of it is at 83, but I know up top it is. So I'm guessing mine, just like you said, mine's probably like 81 on the bottom. So if I could probably bump it up a degree to get 82.
You'll definitely get that gradient, right? I have the probe in the middle as well, but even the fluctuation between the top and bottom, like it'll always be 2 degrees from whatever my probe is reading. So kind of adjust it just based off of that to get it close to 82. But obviously, if temps fluctuate a few degrees, it's not going to matter. But when you cook stuff too hot, you can start seeing problems. Stuff hatches early, underdeveloped. And if you cook stuff too cold, I've seen problems where they're underdeveloped as well. And sometimes you don't figure out what the problem is. And then you're like, oh my gosh, my incubator is actually not heating up properly. And these things were cooking at 76 for the past 2 months. So yeah, it's kind of funny how many things have to go right to be successful, but if you stay on top of the parameters, it's not that difficult to be successful at certain things, at certain geckos. But yeah, a lot of things can go wrong. I think a lot of people don't realize that when they get into breeding. Like, I certainly didn't. I thought every egg was going to hatch, every egg was going to be fertile, every animal was going to be alive. But that was a tough lesson to learn early on.
Definitely not reality. Social media have you believe otherwise. Every egg born hatches, everything's $1,000 animal. Everything's got all their toes and tails, and it's
Yep.
definitely not so.
Yeah.
Reality.
Are
I
Knob-Tails, are
didn't think we
they
asked.
I think you
oh, sorry.
froze. What was that?
I was asking if are Knob-Tails, are they, can they be temp sex determination or no?
I don't think so. I've incubated roughly at the same temp throughout the years, and some years will be male heavy, some years will be female heavy. I don't think I've seen a correlation
Okay.
necessarily, um, and I don't think anybody else has seen a correlation. Um, but that's for Nymphaeus. I can't speak for other geckos, obviously, but I think I bred Diplodactylus Galeatus last year, and they got 6 eggs out of a pair, and it was like 5.1. So I was like, that could be unlucky or it could be temp, but I don't think so because I've seen that. I've seen it in every species.
Hmm.
There's like a year I'll breed Levis and I'll have like 2.10, and then the reverse the next year using the same parameters and everything. So I don't really think it's their temp sex. And if they are, not like as easily as like something like leopard geckos or something like that. But I haven't played. I'll be honest. I haven't played around too much with the temps to like do a proper study. Mostly out of laziness. but yeah, I don't believe they are.
Okay.
I don't believe they are.
What do
That would
you
be nice.
what do you incubate your Euromastic eggs at? How hot?
I think it's 88.
Oh, really?
Either 80 or 88 to 90, I think. But I only breed one species of Euromastics. I like Thomasai. I've always liked them. And a few years ago, I got some and raised them up. I think the first time breeding them was in 2020 or 2021. And yeah, those are really fun. That's a place I want to go to. I want to go to Oman to see them in the wild. That'd be really cool. Frank's been a bunch of times there, so I'm sure I'll end up
That's
going
nice.
with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I
He's
did not
seen them there.
realize how big Euromastics got until my reptile shop over here. I think they have a Egyptian Euromastics. And that thing is a
Those are,
monster. That thing is a
yeah.
monster. Like I was like, holy shit! This thing was like
Are they the
probably
biggest one? Are the
2 foot,
Egyptians the biggest mystics?
I think the
3 and a
Egyptians are the biggest.
yeah, yeah. I was like,
And,
holy shit.
and, and some of the Euromasters can get really big. And Egyptians is the perfect example. But
To not
Thomas
be a
are,
monitor, that's a big lizard, man.
yeah. And
That's
Thomas
what
are
you said.
actually one of Yeah, Toms are actually one of the smallest, if not the smallest, but I think one of the smallest. So I think my adults are like this big.
Those
So
ornate ones are pretty small too. The ornates,
yeah.
they stay pretty
Yeah.
small.
So I can't provide
Cool
housing
animals.
for like an Egyptian. Like that's like an 8 foot, 10 foot cage or something. Most of my animals I house separately and only introduce them during breeding, and that goes for almost everything in my collection, including geckos, with the exception of like the Egernia, and the skinks will be housed together yearly. So yeah, so keeping it really kind of limits the space of how much I can keep, because I keep things individually.
Yeah,
Like certain things will just not thrive if they're constantly with the opposite sex. Like one will be hoarding food, or one will be constantly trying to mate. And it's just stress. And so yeah, I keep
that's
almost
my
everything.
right here. Like the male just
Yeah,
keeps on hounding her. So I got an extra tank, so I'm gonna go ahead and build that out for him, get his ass out of there and leave her alone. Because right now she's giving me 8 clutches this year. So I was like, you're done. Like so
this
after
time.
like yeah, so I need to separate them so she can get a break. Because yeah,
Yeah,
she might not even breed next year just because she gave me 8 clutches. I was like, I don't need any more
yeah,
right now.
yeah. I really like keeping everything separate because you know my friends will make fun of me a lot because a lot of times I'll post like pictures of geckos copulating, and then call me a pervert, you know, because I watch. But like, it's so funny. It's so funny because, from my experience, keeping things separately like that, when you do introduce a male to a female, like sometimes they will just go lock with them the first like 30 seconds. I don't. In the early stages, I used to take notes of like if this male, if I saw the male breed with the female for like every gecko. I don't do that anymore. I basically throw them in there and take them out the next feeding, throw them in there, take them out the next feeding until the female is gravid or not. Um, but sometimes they'll just go for it right away. And it's funny to me because I'll take a picture of it and post it online because I think it's interesting and funny kind of how they breed. But yeah, they'll always make fun of me for just like waiting for them to breed. I've noticed throughout the years when I keep them separate like that, the males are always super pumped up to mate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like when a male hasn't seen a female in like a year, and then you throw him in there, and he's probably smelling her and whatnot like throughout the year, and then you throw him in there, he's like super pumped up to like go mate, and I like that because it kind of shows me like what's receptive, what isn't receptive.
Behaviors, man. You get to see more breeding behaviors, and it's. I get it. Trust me, man. There's so much more to be learned than just keeping them together. You know, it's.
And it kind of helps me see if a female is not receptive because a lot of times I'll put a gecko in there and the male will be ready and the female will just be not having it, and I don't want to stress her out too much, so I'll take him out and try next week, you know? Because I know for the rest of the night, he's going to try to be mating with her when she's not receptive. So I just take them out.
These things are beautiful.
Is that an adult pair? Or are those babies?
No, I actually thought that was a pair until I sexed them recently and ended up being two females, but that's a CB23 and a CB24 female.
Oh, wow. Nice. So
But
you were talking about the Sinopus. Is that the barking gecko?
correct. Yeah.
Okay. Man, I've been one. I try to get Joe on to talk about those, and he's like, no, no one's really going to want to listen to that. I was like, I want to listen to it. Because he said they're really hard. Yeah. Are they really difficult, like Joe was talking about?
Like, so Joe did really good, well with them. I actually got my first pair of Tinnitus Koki from him at Tinley years back, and he did really well with them. They're definitely more of a touchy gecko. They're a little bit difficult as far as breeding goes. Not because they're difficult to breed, but they only lay one egg. It's a hard-shelled egg, and a lot of times they'll destroy it before you get a chance to get it because they'll just lay it on the sand. You know, you don't need to give them like a nest box or anything. They'll just lay it whenever they're ready. And if you have geckos running around there and they like hit it, it's such a thin egg that it'll just crack. So I've definitely missed a few that way, and then babies can be a little difficult to start depending on the species as well.
Yeah.
But they're cool. They're cool.
Yeah. Are they really loud?
The males can be deafening loud. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a
very. I got. No, I mean you have on that Cerdodactylus you got. Does it make noise? Because I know like I have 3 different species of Cerdodactylus, and only 2 of them make noise. Like willingly make noise.
I've only heard when I collected eggs from that female actually, and another female earlier this season is the first time I actually heard them. They like barked at me because I was like getting too close to them, but it wasn't like a loud bark. It was kind of like a nuisance, you know.
Okay.
But the Tinnitus is like you can hear that down the street if you have like a bunch of males calling at the same time. It is that one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I tell Anthony my Zabricus, that thing is like a piercing sound. Oh my God. It is so loud.
It is very, yeah. if you have it in a room in the house, you'll definitely. I know some people in Europe that actually sold theirs because they were trying to keep them in a room where, it was too close to where they were um, like where their bedroom was. And they were just it's like certain frogs. Like you can't keep certain frogs because they'll just call and call and call.
We
And
were just talking about this before you came on. That's funny.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So definitely can't have an army. I would not want an army of them because I have them pretty far away and I can hear them at night sometimes and they're going pretty crazy. The males though, not the females.
Yeah. Nice. Oh man. All right. So I mean, we're getting close to the end on this one. Let me ask you something. Is there any misconceptions about Knob-Tails that maybe you would like to clarify for new keepers? Is there any kind of like, do people say anything like, oh, this one's extremely difficult, or this one's like really easy, but it's not, or they have a crazy attitude? Is there any kind of misconceptions you want to clear up about them?
So I mean, I don't think it's necessarily misconceptions, but the thing that kind of bothers me a lot with certain keepers, and it's not like new keepers at all, it could be keepers of any experience, is they'll ask a million questions and then come back to you and say what's wrong and then didn't listen to anything you told them. So I'm at the point in my reptile career where if somebody does that to me, I won't talk to them anymore. Like I just won't respond just because I feel like I'm just, you know, uh,
Yeah, I mean,
speaking
too
in
much talking on
my
deaf
deaf
ears.
ear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand.
So,
Yeah.
or I won't sell them a gecko because I don't feel like they'll provide for it properly. They'll show me like the setup that they got after I told them, spent my time extensively telling them how I do it and how I think it's proper. Not that my way is the right way always, but when your parameters are so off, I just will just be like, I don't think you're ready for this and move on. But there are certainly other species of Nephris that are, I wouldn't say difficult, but it's always like the room for error, right? Some of them have a smaller margin for error than the others. Like the bigger tailed species, like the fat tailed species, the smooth species at least, like Levis, Hilberensis, Occidentalis, even Vertebralis, they're pretty hardy. And if something goes wrong, you usually have some time to like get them to bounce back. What I noticed with species like Stellatus, Delani, and Levissimus, they're smooth skin species as well, but they have a pretty thin tail, not a lot of fat reserve. Is your margin of error on those tends to be very small. Like if something goes wrong, um, they seem to go downhill very quickly once they go downhill, and they're unfortunately Stellatus are one of the more expensive ones too. So I wouldn't recommend that as like a first intro to knob-tailed geckos. I would say something like maybe Levis, Cinctus, Wheeleri, which are basically, same care. Amia even, I think they're good starters. But I try to tell everybody like, and we all go through this. We see something, we want to get it, right? Like it's cool, we want to get it, but like it's really important to know like how long they live, and just make sure you have the proper husbandry before getting into it. Like don't impulse buy. And I can't like I'm not like dishing out advice that I've followed myself. Like I've definitely impulse bought before, but I've always kind of had either the enclosures ready or had the stuff ready. And I think that's what people need to focus more on before they get something, whatever it is, not tail or not. But going back to like if there are some species that are more difficult, definitely like, but it comes down to the margin of error. Some species are more forgiving than others, and the ones I mentioned, and both kind of the spectrum that I mentioned. I wouldn't say they're difficult geckos though. I think it all comes down to proper husbandry, but that comes down to any animal though too. So I think with proper husbandry, anybody can really have a gecko thrive. And then there's things you learn along the way, obviously, what to do, what not to do. But but yeah, but but they're definitely not like leopard gecko easy. I don't think. Like you
Yeah.
do have to make sure like the hide is moist for them. They can burrow into it. Like you can't just throw a couple of hides in or a water bowl and a dish with worms and call it a day. Like you have to kind of pay attention if they're like burrowing or not eating and stuff like that. So I don't think it's like a advanced gecko, but I wouldn't get one as a first reptile unless you're like really really into it.
Nice.
But that's kind of the reason you don't see them being sold at like a PetSmart or a Petco, like leopard
Oh, no.
geckos or cresteds and stuff that's more forgiving, stuff like that. Because they've come down in price. It's not like Knobb-Tails geckos are super expensive these days. I mean, certain
Yeah. I
species,
mean,
yes,
you can
but
find
like,
a Wheeler, I think that's pretty cheap, So,
yeah, especially like if it's a long male or something you want for a pet, it's not like gonna break the bank, but it's definitely something you need to be on top of a few times a week. You can't like they're not as forgiving as other species of gecko,
yeah, okay. Yeah.
but they're not.
Yeah. All right, hit him with your closing, man.
All right. If say you're at a show vending and a kid came up to the table and said, I want to do this one day. I want to grow up and do everything you're doing. I want to breed geckos, travel the globe. What advice would you give a 10-year-old child that wanted to grow up and follow in your footsteps?
I'd say you're making a terrible decision if I'm a role model. No, honestly, I don't know what I would tell them, but if it's something they wanted to do, there's certain people that have come to me that have wanted to start and whatnot, and I've helped them out in certain ways. I don't know about 10-year-olds. I think that's pretty young for like this stuff, but if they're doing it with a parent, that's kind of helping them along the way, that's definitely cool. I would just, I would definitely tell them to get in contact with people that already breed them. Um, learn about husbandry, what kind of care they require, how often that care needs to happen, and just realize how much of a commitment it is. Because I think people forget the commitment part. It's not as easy as like a dog or a cat. Well, maybe not a dog, but a cat. They're not just gonna eat on their own and go to the bathroom and be like self-sustaining animals, basically. I think learning about that commitment aspect of it is a big deal because, yes, people don't realize like there is upkeep. You don't just get it and then everything is all cool. I think I would probably start off telling, to learn about that and talk to people that have bred them, and then maybe start off with an easier species first of reptile and try to breed that first to see if that's even something you want to get into. Because I think a lot of people want to get into breeding reptiles until they breed reptiles, and then sometimes it's not really as what they envisioned or as fun as they thought it would be. Sometimes people want to keep reptiles because keeping them is fun, and they don't end up wanting to breed them. So you don't necessarily need to breed every reptile you have. That's not the mindset I have. But like, if I get an animal, there's going to be two of them, and there's going to be different sexes, so I can't try to breed them. I don't really have any pets, but yeah, probably start keeping reptiles first before jumping into the whole breeding stuff.
Makes sense.
Okay. Definitely see that life cycle, right? Of keeping the baby, raising that baby. Like I said, I mean, Ant preaches he grabbed all his chihuahuas, lychees from a tiny little baby, raised them up, you know, 3 to 5 years, and now he's you know he's he's getting those eggs, and now he's about to start that whole cycle over again. But he started as a little, there were little tiny little geckos. So definitely yeah, definitely something people should look at, and because if you know how to raise the baby up, you're gonna be okay when you have hatchlings. You're gonna already know how to
That's
raise them. raise that
Yeah,
hatchling up to an adult.
that's a good point too. And it's always actually good to kind of start off with juveniles, or some people sell adults when they're getting out or thinning down and whatnot, but I've always preferred getting young animals to raise myself, just because if an adult's been living a certain way for a long time and you switch it up, and that could be a huge stressor. Um, Plus, it could be like a burnt out breeder. So if someone's first experience is they get a pair of adults that are burnt out and they try to breed and they're not successful and they kind of think they're doing something wrong, they could be doing everything perfect. Those adults are just not going to produce it anymore. So yeah, I would definitely always go for, if you can get juveniles to raise up for yourself, and that way
I
you
don't
do.
want to breed them after that. I've had animals that I've bought as babies and raised them up, and quite honestly, had zero interest, to reproduce them or have more babies by the time they got to be adults. I'm like, I'm all set. I don't, I'll keep these as pets that I have, but I don't need to reproduce these,
Yeah, for sure.
opposed to buying adults and then breeding them and having, a season's worth of babies that I don't
You're
care
not
to
really
do anything
into.
with.
Yeah, for sure.
So my question is, what has been your biggest failures in this hobby, and what have you learned from them?
Man, I mean, I've had a lot of failures. I think one of my biggest, or one of the first big failure for me that was like difficult to take was this was years ago when I first got Egernia epsisolis, and they're not cheap animals. And I had a female that died, and I cut her open, and she had a baby inside her that was, that was not alive, but she couldn't pass it, so that's why she passed herself. And that was a really difficult one, just because they're not easy to get, and then just having an animal die. I mean, it happens. Obviously, it's part of keeping and breeding, but it's not easy. You get. I can't say you get used to it. It's always difficult, but you can expect that animals will die at some point. But that one was one that sticks out definitely. And then, so yeah, having some animals die with nothing you can do is a difficult one. But it's something that people need to realize that they'll cross that bridge at some point with keeping and breeding animals. Like I had a pair of shinglebacks for a long time, and the female died this year on me, and that was a difficult one to lose. But I can't say it was easier, but it was not as difficult as losing like the first animal I lost, because you have this mindset of like you have live animals, like when things go wrong, they're not alive. So, so it's losing animals is always difficult, especially if there's a complication like something with birth or something where you're like almost there and you were gonna get a baby and the exact opposite happens. That's always a difficult one, because I think I'm at least very hard on myself. Like, what could I have done differently? Could I have caught the signs earlier? And with reptiles, it's not like they can talk to you and tell you what's wrong. So. And it's really difficult. Sometimes it's really difficult to decipher if there is something wrong. An animal could look totally healthy one day, and then the next day you find it, past in its enclosure. So, and sometimes there's just nothing you can do. That's just what it is. So, animal deaths are always, I feel like, is a failure. Not necessarily because it is a failure, but it always feels like it, right? Like, I didn't do something right. So I always feel like it's a failure when an animal does.
Question like your husbandry and everything like that when it happens.
You question everything. You go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And if you don't have anything conclusive, then you never get an answer. And a lot of times, you're not going to have something conclusive. Even if you get like a necropsy or like sometimes you're just not going to get, like with the epsisolis, for example, I found out why, because I cut her open myself and was like, okay, but then I didn't really know the root cause of like why she couldn't lay, right? because I've had some in the same exact environment that did lay. So it was like, so it's really difficult. And then sometimes with babies not making it, not every single baby you hatch is going to make it. I think we give them a much better chance in captivity, but that doesn't mean that every animal is supposed to make it. Like, that's why survival of the fittest is a thing in the wild. The weak ones don't make it, but I think earlier on when like eggs didn't hatch or like a baby wouldn't eat or like something hatched that week, I always thought of it as a failure until I like realized like not every egg is going to hatch in the wild, not every baby's going to make it in the wild. So those are things that you can't control. Things I could control that I think really get to me as failures are like if an incubator like spikes or something because I wasn't monitoring it or I was using like an old thermostat or something and I was like I should get a new one but totally did it until like it was too late type of deal.
Yeah.
Those things I'm more hard on myself because those were preventable things that I knew at some point, So it's like the weirdest things can happen. So I think you can't cover it all. We're all human, but I think those failures are ones that I get most upset about because they're something within my control. Malfunctions or, something that I saw happening. But just was too lazy to fix it or something like that. And it didn't work. But yeah, I think earlier on too, some of the failures were incorrect husbandry. Like would get something too moist or too dry and things like that. Just not researching enough, being more pumped up about to get something than actually, spending the time with the enclosure and the habitat. And I think that's a common one because people really get excited about the thought of keeping something that everything just seems like it's easy afterwards. Like the main goal is to like acquire it and just you have all this positive you have this positive vision in your head of what it's going to be. And then when you get it, it's not always like something is not eating because it's not the right husbandry and it's like a challenge from the start. So like those are the kinds of things that I think earlier on I learned pretty quick because I went through them pretty quick. And those are certain things that everybody's going to have to go through because you can't get everything right 100% of the time, But yeah, I would just say to people just starting out, like I wouldn't be too hard on yourself if like you don't do well breeding something the first year or two. Like certain things just don't breed like right away, Like I think I had like a pair of Egernia for like 8 years before I actually saw a baby.
Wow.
So sometimes you just, if you enjoy it, it doesn't matter if you get a baby or not because you like keeping them. But if your only goal is to breed them, then yeah, 8 years would suck to wait.
Oh man. Well, Sam, thank you for coming on and talking about all this stuff. Especially like I said, I always enjoy when people talk about like, especially when you go herping, you're going to a different country and sharing your thoughts on everything like that. So definitely appreciate you coming on and talking about that stuff. And
Yeah.
just like I said, and I definitely appreciate your talk at the symposium. It's like I have so many notes on that one on like this book I got, just writing down all the stuff that you're talking about. Me and my buddy Dustin were both just writing stuff down. It's like, all right, cool, cool, cool. Because I was like, I'm gonna get these things. I want to learn about them, but I just never got to it. But definitely still appreciate what you do for this hobby, man. So
Oh,
where can
yeah, anytime. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy.
all right,
Awesome.
cool. Where can everybody find you at?
So I used to have a website, but I still own the domain, but it's not like alive anymore. So I wouldn't go to the knob-tail.com. The most, the easiest way to find me or where I post stuff is on social media, mostly Instagram. The handle's the Knob-Tail, and then Facebook, same thing, the Knob-Tail as well. And that's usually where I post anything I'm breeding or, and that's where I keep everybody up to date on anything. And just, yeah, feel free to reach out. And I'm more than happy to talk about reptiles, unless you just don't want to listen to anything that I tell you.
Understandable. Later, guys.
Yo, creeping in the dark, life nocturnal, dark and dark, both paths arboreal to terrestrial. Sticky toes gripping forest students that explore. Listen close, Gecko podcast, that's knowledge galore. Reptile talk, host Anthony and Jason. Trade secrets flow, no time wasted. From tropics to town, it's sight raining. With every chat, reptile game changing. Escaping heat waves, tan under rays, desert sand echoes, sun blazing days. Little hustlers, camouflage a maze, catch them speaking wisdom, the wild on replay. Reptile talk, host Anthony and Jason. Trade secrets flow, no time wasted. From tropics to town, it's sight raining. With every chat, reptile game changing. Sculling through the leaves, shadows unseen. Master of the skies, chameleon dream. Lizard tails flip, script getting clean. Gecko exchange, true reptile fiends. Reptile talk, host Anthony and Jason. Trade secrets flow, no time wasted. From tropics to town, it's sight raining. With every chat, reptile game changing. Scuttling through the leaves.